Chekhov said, "Man will become better when you show him what he's like." I'd like to show you what we're like, so hopefully we can become a little better. First, the bad news. Most of our choices are made by our survival instinct, not by our intelligence. Generally in life, we tend to react more than we tend to choose. The good news is that it is possible to have a better, higher, more sophisticated level of thinking. It just doesn't happen automatically. So how do we get there? How do we achieve a more evolved mode of thinking? That's what I'd like to talk to you about today. I call it emotional wisdom. And it has two parts. The first part is to understand what our emotions mean while they're happening to us, and to understand how our emotions make us behave. Once we understand that, the second stage is to learn how to better manage and control our emotions so that they don't control us. And therein lies the path to real freedom of choice. Now, I know many of us probably have a different idea of what freedom of choice really means. I'll get back to that a little bit later on. So I came to this work through a journey of self-analysis that's always been very important to me, coupled with a little bit of research into psychology, social psychology. And what I noticed was that whatever was happening within me seemed to be happening in everybody else around me as well. And this led me to understand three basic truths about our species. Number one, human behavior is essentially predictable. We all do similar things in similar circumstances. If that were not the case, psychologists wouldn't have a field. You wouldn't be able to classify human behavior. Second of all, as I mentioned, our thoughts and actions are chosen by our survival instinct, not by our intelligence. And finally, every decision that we make is designed to make us feel safer. It's not designed to be correct or wise, no matter how much we think that it is. So let's jump in. What is emotion really? It seems to me that many people think that first you think about something and what it means to you, and then you feel about that based on all of your thinking. That is exactly the opposite of the truth. What actually happens is that emotions happen first. They are instantaneous. They are reactions to input from our surroundings. Once we feel something, then our survival instinct gives it a meaning. And it only means one of two things. We're either feeling more safe or we're feeling less safe. Once we've decided that, then our thinking process wraps it up in a nice story to make us feel good about the reaction that we had, so that we get to feel right, so that we get to feel safe. So why does it work like this? Why do we work this way? And the answer is because of the way that our brain is put together. So let's take a look at that for a moment. The brain essentially has three layers. The first layer is called the reptilian brain, the brain stem. This makes a creature simply capable of basic movement, coordination, being alive. The second layer of the brain is called the limbic system, and this provides the capacity for emotion, long-term memory, learning. So a creature that has this has a distinct survival advantage. You can remember something bad that happened, so you're better prepared the next time. The last stage is the cerebral cortex, the seat of logic and higher reasoning. Now, while animals also do have a cerebral cortex, it's far more developed in humans. I'd like to focus just for a moment on one small structure inside the limbic brain, about the size of 2 almonds. It's called the amygdala. The amygdala generates all human emotion, whether it's positive emotion or negative emotion. In fact, people who have damage to the amygdala often have difficulty interpreting threats accurately. And they can often develop psychopathic or even sociopathic behaviors as a result of that. So now we understand what emotion means. Our emotions are essentially our survival instinct's alert system. If we feel a negative emotion, it's our survival instinct signaling to us that we're feeling unsafe or insecure in some way, even if it's only perceived. And therefore we have to fight or we have to flee from that fear. If we feel a positive emotion, it means that our survival instinct is signaling us that there is an absence of threats. We're safe, we can stay where we are, we can keep doing what we're doing, and we like that. So I like to call the opposite of fight or flight, stay and play. Now, obviously, we humans also like to find ways to turn bad feelings into good feelings. We may eat something delicious so that the body feels pleasure and we feel good. Or we may ingest a mind or a mood-altering substance to anesthetize our negative emotions. But that doesn't change the fact that essentially this is what emotions mean. It either means that you're safe or that you're unsafe. Now, the stories that we tell ourselves about what our emotions mean, on the other hand, are not the truth at all. Those are the rationalizations and the justifications we tell ourselves so that we get to feel right, so that we get to feel safe. The unsophisticated truth is that we are not interested in the truth or in fact. We, as humans, are interested in validation because that's what makes us feel safe. You don't watch the cable news channel that you watch because they're right. You watch it because they're telling it the way you like to hear it. Make no mistake. So now that we understand emotion, how does it make us behave? Well, we've studied animal anatomy to learn about human anatomy because the systems work so similarly. We even study the brains of rats to learn about human neurology. That would not be possible if the systems didn't work the same way. Genetically, we're as much as 98% similar to certain animals. In fact, certain animal organs can even be transplanted into humans. And finally, the study of human body language and facial expressions is very similar in humans as it is in animals because the musculoskeletal machine works the same way. So the question is, how can we learn about human behavior? What can we learn about it by looking at animal behavior, if we are willing and courageous enough to look? Well, animal behavior is determined by their survival instinct, which is generated by two essential truths about their world. The first truth is that animals are mortal and frail, so they have a very well-developed fight or flight response and a powerful drive to reproduce so that the species will continue. Secondly, animals must compete for their survival in a world of limited resources. So as a result of these two built-in vulnerabilities, there are only two responses. If you are the dominant predatory type of animals, you'll find safety in your strength and power because others will be afraid to confront you. If you're not the alpha in your group, you'll be forced to accept submission to the alpha male in the group, or fight or leave. Or if you're the prey animals, you have to find safety in numbers. One zebra on the Serengeti is definitely going to be dinner, but if there's one zebra in a herd of 100, there's only a 1% chance he's going to be eaten that day. Now, humans work exactly the same way. We too are mortal and frail, so we have that same very well-developed fight or flight response and a powerful drive to reproduce. And this is why sex and violence are so prevalent in our culture, in our media, in our society. Secondly, we too must work and compete for our resources in a world of limited resources. And that's why money and power have always been so lusted after in the human experience, because they represent safety. We humans also have the same two responses to built-in vulnerability. If we are the dominant, strong, overbearing type of person, we'll find safety in our strength because others will be afraid to confront us. If we are not the strong one in our peer group, we will have to accept submission to the strong people in our peer group, or we will have to find safety in numbers to stand up against the power. Now, the consequence of this is that people who bully are not doing it because they're strong. They're doing it because they are so insecure that they feel the only way they can be safe is if they can put down or diminish somebody else with their power. So it's not a very sophisticated position to take. So it's this built-in vulnerability that we and animals share that make us group thinkers. And once we are in a group, we will do just about anything to stay in the group because we feel that our safety depends on the security of our group. Now, the problem with our human groupthink is this. We join a group so that we get to feel the safety and protection of numbers, but that's not enough for us. It's not enough to be in a group. We have to believe that we're in the best group, the strongest group, so that we feel the most safe. The problem is if we make our group out to be right about everything, that means everybody else's group is wrong about everything, right? My sports team, those are heroes, but your guys are losers, right? Even though at the end of the season, some of them may swap teams. Secondly, my religion is right. I'm sorry to be the one to tell you, but that means yours is probably wrong. And of course, I have some very evolved political ideas, but some of yours are downright evil. Sound familiar? The problem is when we go down this thought process, it allows us to justify just about anything to just about anyone, and we do, unfortunately. So, it is this trait of being group thinkers that makes us hypersensitive to acknowledging differences between people, because any difference represents a possible threat, a possible outsider. And it is this fear of difference that is the root of all prejudice and bigotry in our world. And the unfortunate truth of this is that all of us are biased and prejudiced against someone or something to some degree or another. It's built into the system. There's nothing we can do about it. The question isn't, what are you biased about? The question is, what are you not biased about? And that's a very difficult question to answer honestly. So you probably are realizing that we're all part of many different groups. I may be a white, male, heterosexual, American, expatriate South African, socially liberal, fiscal conservative Laker fan. The question is, which group takes priority in my thinking? And the answer is, the one that's under the greatest imminent threat in the moment. If the US men's national team is playing in the World Cup final, I believe, I'm either going to be there or I'm going to be watching it on television. Unless, of course, there's a war on or the planet's being invaded by aliens. If I'm the only male at a bridal shower, then my instinct is focusing only on the gender gap because there's no other groupthink at stake in the moment. So the underlying truth here is that fear is the default human emotion. Everything we feel is either the presence or the absence of fear. As William McDougall, the father of modern social psychology, puts it, the instincts are the prime movers of all human activity. Now, this might make you concerned about our progress as a species. The good news is we are making progress. What does that look like? Anytime we exhibit tolerance, acceptance, the embracing of differences between people, whether superficial differences or differences in ideas, that represents our behavioral evolution as a species. The problem is just that it's happening far too slowly and far too painfully. And we can do something about that. What can we do about that? That brings me to our second part of emotional wisdom. How do we control our emotional impulses so that we have less dysfunction in our lives and in our world? What is the definition of freedom of choice? There was fascinating research done in the 80s and 90s by Benjamin Libet into this question. He placed people in an environment where they could make free will decisions, and he measured their brainwave activity, and he discovered something remarkable. He found that when people made a decision that they believed was a free will decision, the brainwave activity building up to that moment of choice began moments before they became aware of even wanting to make a choice. So many people pointed to this result and said, that proves there's no such thing as free will. We're all biological automatons. It's brainwave activity, and we only think it's a free choice. And Benjamin Libet said, no, you don't understand what freedom of choice is. Freedom of choice does not mean plucking an idea out of thin air. Freedom of choice means veto power over an emotional impulse. When an emotional impulse is bubbling up from your limbic brain, your fear is prompting you to act this way or that to make yourself feel safer. The emotionally wise person recognizes what's happening and says, I see what my emotion is trying to do, and I'm going to veto that. I'm not going to act on my emotion. I'm rather going to choose to act this way because these are the values that I aspire to. That is freedom of choice. And the consequence of this is that we don't all possess freedom of choice in equal measure. We each only have freedom of choice to the extent that we have control over our own emotional impulses. So this explains many interesting things about human behavior. For one thing, it explains why emotion tends to trump logic in our lives. That is because emotion is tied to our survival instinct. It's more primal, whereas logic is about the details and the planning. So if you feel a fear response, your emotion will take over and triage the situation until the crisis has passed, and logic will be sidelined until the crisis has passed. So this explains many things. For example, love is blind. Finding a relationship is a powerful sense of security, so you're not going to allow somebody to talk you out of it using logical argument. It also explains why we are so reticent to leave a poor job or relationship environment because of the safety that we derive from it. It also explains why some doctors smoke. Very illogical given what they know. But I'd like to focus for a moment on test-taking anxiety. Why do many people go blank in a test? It is not necessarily because they don't understand the material. It's because they're having a fear response. Look at that kid's face. You can see what he's thinking. If I mess up on this test, Harvard is out the window, like Stanford's off the table, right? Too much pressure to put on a kid. So he's having a fear response. I may not do well on the test. I may be going to get a bad GPA. So his logical ability has been blocked, and that is why he can't do well on the test. So how do we get beyond that? How do you fight against it? You can't eliminate your emotions. They're built into the system. Dr. Jekyll tried. It turned him into the murderous Mr. Hyde. So how do we fight this? I like to call it yoga thinking. Just like breathing happens automatically and you don't have to think about it, you can, though, consciously control your breathing if you choose to for yoga, meditation, for certain practices. Similarly, if you're not paying attention to your mental thought process, your emotion will tend to trump your logic. But if you know how the system works and you're aware of it, it becomes possible then to use your logic to better manage and control that emotional impulse. So in the case of a test-taking anxiety, the way you conquer it is incrementally. Each test, you go in, you sit down, you're ready, that you're about to have a fear response as soon as you read the question. And you almost manage the emotion by talking it. You manage your emotion and say, just wait. Before you become afraid, let me spend a few minutes reading the question. Let me think about it for a while. In 3 minutes' time, if I haven't thought of anything, worry then. So it's an incremental process of learning how to better manage your emotion. It doesn't happen overnight. One has to be prepared to put in the work. So in closing, the reason that I wanted to talk about this topic is I think this is one of the most important conversations in the world to be having. Emotional wisdom is one of the only things that can prevent us from hurting ourselves, from hurting each other, from hurting the world through greed and selfishness, and from not cooperating and coexisting and sharing resources responsibly. If we don't engage emotional wisdom, then fear and groupthink is going to continue to run the show. And we all know what that looks like. Has it not become tiresome enough? Choosing freely is not automatic. What's automatic are your emotional reactions. Choosing freely is not easy. It takes conscious thought. It takes awareness. It takes focus. But it is entirely possible that we can reach this level of mental function. It's not only possible, it is the gateway to our emotional evolution as a species. We are capable of achieving anything that we put our minds to. So let's put our minds to this, and let's make our world and our lives better. And I'll leave you with one challenge. The next time you have a negative emotional response, try tracing it back to your amygdala, to its root cause. Ask yourself, what insecurity, what fear is triggering this emotional response? What is it trying to get me to do to make me feel safer? And then choose instead. Thank you.